I hope everyone had a great lunch and had a chance to talk with others at their table. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Andrew Graham, your host and outgoing president of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Viewers, thank you for joining us today. It's been another busy year of events and activities for us at the Canadian Club of Toronto, and it's been my pleasure to serve as president of the club this year. I, like all members of the board, volunteer my time with the Canadian Club for a simple reason. What the Canadian Club does matters. The club provides a forum for leaders from many parts of the economy, many parts of the country, many parts of the world to engage with Canadians on the issues that matter most. The rise of social media hasn't made this less important. In fact, it's made it more vital than it's ever been before. 122 years on, we believe that engaging in civil discussion will never go out of style. Thank you all for sharing this event with us today. We're also fortunate to have wonderful sponsors. Let us take a moment to acknowledge the generous support of today's sponsors, Davies and KPMG. Thank you. Now it's time to introduce today's speaker. I can tell you that as an entrepreneur myself, building a company is not an easy road. And in Canada, it's often been harder than in other parts of the world to take an idea and turn it into a business and then scale it globally. One of the reasons for this is a lack of capital. And that's why today's discussion, and that's why today's speaker, I think, is so important to the growth of the Canadian economy. The newly created Canadian Business Growth Fund is in the business of helping Canadian businesses to scale, keep control, and indeed win on the global stage. CBGF's founding CEO, George Rossolatos, has been in the role since last year. He's here to raise awareness of the fund and to provide insights on what's needed for entrepreneurs to think and act bigger. The Chartered Public Accountant has more than 2 decades of experience as an investor, as an entrepreneur, and as a business leader. As CEO of CBGF, he shapes the strategic direction and management of the fund. Before his current leadership role, George headed Avante Logics. Many of you may know Avante from one of its brands, Avante Security. And that gave him, I think, a really great experience as an entrepreneur. He shaped the company's strategic direction and vision and was instrumental in its operational turnaround. Prior to Avante, George worked in private equity. He was a partner and co-founder of TorqueWest Partners, and he was also an investment principal at Harrison and spent time at E&Y. The CBGF CEO has been featured on Canada's Top 40 Under 40 and is a member of the Young Presidents Organization. George, I'm pleased to pass the Canadian Club of Toronto's podium over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you, Andrew, for those kind words, and thank you for coming today, and thank you to the Canadian Club for hosting me. I appreciate the opportunity. I want to especially thank KPMG and Davies as our sponsors today for allowing us to come together today. We have a couple things to celebrate today. First is it's Andrew's final luncheon as president of the Canadian Club. So congratulations on a great year, a great calendar, and for everything you've done to help the club. And thank you for being a visible example of some of the entrepreneurial themes I'm going to talk about here today. You've done a great job with your business. The second milestone is a little more personal, and that's the 1-year anniversary of the Canadian Business Growth Fund, which just occurred actually last week. I'd like to show you what our fund has been doing for the last 12 months in a way that only comes when you have a passion of putting your country first.
We believe in Canada. We believe in Canadians. We believe that our history gives us only a hint of what our future could be. A future of growth, opportunity, innovation, and leadership on the global stage. A future driven by our values of diversity, inclusion, and a willingness to work hard. We believe in our entrepreneurs who will build that future. We're the Canadian Business Growth Fund, and we believe it's time to think big. Time to turn promise into dominating performance. Time to give our up-and-coming entrepreneurs a path that protects their vision and their bold plans for growth. Time they had a trusted partner, offering patient minority growth capital to help them reach their full potential. We are that partner. 13 leading Canadian banks and insurance companies came together to form our fund, with $1 billion in projected commitments and one very clear national mandate: to give our great entrepreneurs access to the growth capital, support, and mentorship that will take them to the highest levels of success and embolden them to drive prosperity, innovation, and job creation for all Canadians. A belief that comes from thinking big. We are the Canadian Business Growth Fund. We believe.
Now, that is a strong statement of what we believe. In the most formal sense, the CBGF's mandate is to help Canadian entrepreneurs with the capital, expertise, and talent that they need to drive their businesses to the next level and realize their full potential. But there's another less formal role we've taken on. That's to celebrate our entrepreneurs, to embolden them to think bigger, to make sure they know that they'll have the support they need to fulfill their vision, no matter how ambitious or audacious their goals are. When I see that video, I think about the hundreds of entrepreneurs I've met across the country in the past year. I think of the entrepreneurs I've been around and been exposed to. And being entrepreneurial comes entirely from being around an entrepreneur since the day I was born. That's my dad, pictured here with my mom on the day of his retirement. My dad's story is not uncommon. He's one of millions of people that immigrated to Canada looking for a better life, a bigger opportunity. He arrived in 1967 from the smallest, poorest part of a Greek island, where the soccer balls were made of taped up socks, and homework was done by candlelight at night. You hear these stories, but my dad actually lived it. And so you can imagine what Canada represented in his imagination. And then he got here, empty pockets, specifically to Ottawa, which was in the midst of one of the coldest winters on record. He was a stranger, a cold, strange land, didn't speak the language, with strange customs that he was trying to figure out, like people strapping steel to their shoes and running around ice and hitting people. He became a great hockey fan, by the way. The engineering credentials he'd earned in Greece in the Greek Navy weren't recognized here. So he got a job as an apprentice mechanic at Sears Auto. And he actually drove a taxi at night to get by and make ends meet. It wasn't easy. Greeks are mainstream today, ingrained in our cultural fabric, but it wasn't always the case. 1967 was a different time. He was paid less, he was passed up for promotions, he faced a fair bit of prejudice. But it didn't stop him from pursuing his big dreams. He learned English with cue cards in his pockets, 10 words a day. And after working for years around the clock, he scraped together enough money to open up his own rundown garage under the BP banner. And he enjoyed some early traction with it. But it was snatched away from him just 2 years later when his lease renewal was denied. And undeterred, he then borrowed money from every friend, family, acquaintance he could find, and he bought his own shop, where only he would be in control of his own destiny. And he started over again as Nick's Service Center, as you can see here. And for 30 years, this is where you'd find him. It was a grind, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturdays. It was never ending, like it is for every entrepreneur. And let's not forget, they're not the only ones making sacrifices. It wasn't easy for my mom either. The one thing that sometimes gets lost in our admiration for entrepreneurs is the sacrifices their families make along the way. I was at the shop from the age of 8, pumping gas, balancing the till, changing tires, and later doing some more advanced jobs that I probably should have been doing. But my dad gave me a lifelong admiration for everyone that has the courage to be an entrepreneur. He taught me the essence of what it means not only to be an entrepreneur, but to persevere as an entrepreneur through the inevitable challenges and setbacks that happen along the way. To take smart risks, to pursue a different path, to build a base of satisfied customers through trust, integrity, and great customer service, to expand, to create jobs and accept responsibility for your employees' livelihood and that of their families as well. They showed me that this kind of entrepreneurial thinking can be applied by any person in any business, whether or not your name is on the sign. I had no idea how lucky I was growing up to be part of that entrepreneurial environment. But you know what? There are hundreds of thousands of people like my parents in every city, town, and village in Canada. Now, the economic value they create is obvious. Small to medium-sized businesses are the backbone of our economy, driving more than half of our GDP. The acronym for these, SMEs, is meant to refer to companies with fewer than 500 employees. SMEs represent 99.7% of all businesses in Canada. They employ 90.3% of our private sector labor force. And 85% of the jobs last year were created by SMEs. And here's one my dad will appreciate. Approximately 19% of immigrants are self-employed, compared to 15% of those born here. Choose any metaphor you like. Entrepreneurs truly are the backbone, the foundation, the core of our economy. But I believe the value goes far beyond the statistics. It's what they inspire. It's the lessons that they impart on the people around them. You won't see the vast majority of them hosting Dragon's Den or on the cover of ROB magazine, but they should all be celebrated in the same way. Because it's not just the economic benefits entrepreneurs bring us, it's the example that they set for all of us. The inspiration they can give about living a more entrepreneurial life, no matter what our place in an organization may be. The skills that every entrepreneur demonstrates, like courage, determination, a willingness to pursue a different path, having faith in yourself, and being perpetually optimistic, in even the most trying times, are the skills that every company needs to grow. They are the heart of the innovation mindset that we need to encourage in every organization, large and small. Our strong, growing economy depends on it. But that future is not guaranteed, because here's a fundamental question that confronts us as Canadians. If entrepreneurs are so valuable, if they are responsible for so much of our economy, why do so many of them run into roadblocks on their path to growth? Why do so many terrific and committed entrepreneurs stumble when they try to take their small companies and make them big? Why do we see so many great companies sold before they reach their full potential? Why do we have so few global success stories? Don't get me wrong, the broad economic indicators in Canada are positive. We're doing well as a country. But the most popular metrics ignore some of the problems that are beneath the surface. For one thing, a recent BDC study indicates that the chances of an SME growing from the category of small company to large is only 2% in Canada. Here's another. According to a 2017 report by the Minister of Finance's Economic Advisory Council on Economic Growth, the number of leading global Canadian companies decreased by 73% in the last quarter century. Another troubling sign is in our patent applications. Patents are a gauge of a country's ability to convert novel ideas into inventions. Unfortunately, Canada's patent applications are declining, down 17% in the last 10 years. What's worse is that patents granted to Canadian investors by the US Patent Office in 2016, 58% of these were assigned to companies located outside of Canada. This tells us that many of our best and brightest are seeking opportunities elsewhere to foster entrepreneurship. We also see a problem in the number of initial public offerings in Canada. Between 1986 and 1995, there were over 1,700 IPOs on the TSX or TSX Venture. The following decade, the number was cut below half of that, and then declined again in the next decade, crashing to just 35 in 2017 and unbelievably 17 in 2018. The implication of all of this is obvious. We're not scaling enough SMEs in Canada. We also have some insight into some Canadian exit stories from the Canadian Venture Capital Association, looking at numbers between 2016 and 2018. The numbers are alarming. When a company is sold by a private equity firm, half the time the buyer is foreign. And when it comes to venture capital exits, approximately 80% of the buyers are foreign. And with this, our intellectual property, our brands, sometimes even our senior talent and our head offices leave too. We're losing too many of our great ideas and innovations. What does this all tell us? It seems that as a country, we are really good at the early stage of company creation and growth. In fact, Canada is ranked second by the World Economic Forum in the ease of establishing a new firm. But we are not as good at sustaining them over the longer term horizons and turning them into something big. Many that had a chance to do so, our best and boldest new enterprises, are too often sold too early in their development. In many cases, it's to a US or foreign acquirer, not because they wanted to, but because they had no other choice. Many entrepreneurs cannot find minority capital to help them scale their company while keeping control of their business. For many, the alternative to giving up control is just selling the whole company. Why are they in this predicament? Well, there seems to be an increasing amount of angel and venture capital to start companies, and an increasing amount of buyout capital to acquire companies, but there's a clear shortage of capital in between to fund growth and expansion projects for high potential businesses in this gap that sits between venture and buyout capital. This is the growth capital gap in Canada that must be fixed. It must be fixed to foster growth, job creation, and leadership in Canada. It must be fixed to give businesses a chance to scale up and become large businesses with national, even a global footprint. It must be fixed to stop the hollowing out of the mid-tier market in Canada as smaller companies are sold long before they realize their potential. Doing so would reverse the downward spiral of IPOs, of patents, and the flight of global leaders from Canada. And it would increase both the number of customers for products and services, and by definition, the pool of experienced executive talent in Canada who can build their careers here rather than looking elsewhere. It's a virtuous cycle. The Canadian Business Growth Fund was created to fix this gap. Our vision is very simple: to become Canada's leading growth capital investor and partner of choice for mid-market entrepreneurs in supporting them to reach their full potential. The roots of the fund came from the same Minister of Finance's Economic Advisory Council I referred to earlier. It recommended the creation of a private sector-led growth fund to help high-caliber established businesses grow in Canada. The response from our leading financial institutions was immediate. 13 of our banks and insurance companies came together to form the CBGF. Some of these forward-thinking institutions are represented here today. We appreciate your support. We're grateful for our initial contributions of $545 million and projected future commitments of $1 billion to help Canadian companies, all from the private sector. With that commitment, we give emerging companies a choice they've never had, a choice that gives them 3 very specific ways to fill their growth capital gap. The first is obvious. We fill the growth capital gap with capital, patient minority capital. It isn't that the capital wasn't available before. It's that for many entrepreneurs, the options were limited. In the past, the price of growth could be taking on too much debt, or losing control of your company, or having your vision overturned, or potentially even getting fired when you gave up control. But entrepreneurs didn't have the luxury of being picky. There simply weren't enough options to worry about these potential downsides. The CBGF is that new, different option. For one thing, we never seek more than a minority stake, so the entrepreneur stays in control of their destiny. Another big difference is that we are patient. The CBGF is evergreen, without an end. This is very different than most funds out there. Almost all funds, venture and buyout, have an end. Usually they have 5 years to invest their capital and hold investments for 3 to 5 years before exiting. But great businesses do not scale in 3 to 5 years. With our unique evergreen structure, we can be partners with our companies for 5, 10, 15 years or longer. This changes the very dynamic of the partnership. It allows entrepreneurs to focus on what they do best, growing their companies. What else is different with our capital? Our flexibility is attractive as companies determine their best way forward. We have goals to generate returns, but we're always thinking about what the company's needs are as we're working with them. For example, a company may not need the dilution that comes with common equity. They may be able to have a different structure, like preferred shares or a convertible note that helps them keep more of their company, or a combination thereof. We can structure our investments with the company in mind. And the CBGF can encourage entrepreneurs to raise only the capital they need and not dilute unnecessarily, as we will be there for them later. It's exactly what we did with our first partner, the Lyft Auto Group out of Kelowna, British Columbia. They were close to selling control of their company, but we were there to show them a much more appealing way forward where they kept control. Our flexibility isn't just in what we offer, it's the way we offer it. We can work alone or with multiple partners. It's whatever is best for the company and the entrepreneur. And we can react quickly and execute efficiently. Then as our partners grow, we can be there every step of the way. It's because we fill the gap with more than just capital. As a minority investor, we also help entrepreneurs with the guidance, expertise, and mentorship they need to scale their company over the long term, enabling them to stay in control of their company as it goes from small to big. The value of this cannot be overstated for an entrepreneur. Navigating the scale-up challenge is a new world for most entrepreneurs. Just being an entrepreneur is isolating to start with. We do not do nearly enough to help guide the next generation of young Canadian entrepreneurs to become battle-tested for the global stage. Who knows, if my dad had it, he might have created a national automotive repair company. New entrepreneurs will only develop into seasoned CEOs of larger companies if they're helped along the way with knowledge and wisdom and strategic advice at the right times. They need to develop core governance skills, be able to create effective boards, become effective capital allocators. They must understand how to execute creative add-on acquisitions, how to grow internationally, how to enter new markets. None of these are obvious to a brand new entrepreneur who's also in the middle of growing their fledgling business. But that's exactly what each of our partners can count on from us. With our talent network, the CBGF brings industry experts to the table from across the country, along with our extensive network that extends to all of our shareholders and partner companies. With deep experience in corporate finance and business growth strategy, the CBGF team and our talent network can help entrepreneurs overcome some of these critical knowledge and talent gaps that arise with significant growth. It's something that Jason Taffler from a company called Unite has really come to appreciate. We're helping Jason scale up his company, which creates neural solutions for the mental health industry. We not only provided capital for an acquisition, but the support and guidance to do diligence on that acquisition and close it, and now build his board. It's proof that the power of our unique range of options available to our entrepreneurs. Our goal is to provide capital and guidance, and with this in place, foster and encourage entrepreneurial ambition for them to think bigger. There's one more way we fill the gap. In addition to providing patient, flexible growth capital that puts the entrepreneur first, and the guidance and mentorship to help them scale. That's by offering a made-in-Canada solution for growing SMEs to take the next step. Now, most entrepreneurs don't aspire to sell control of their legacy and their brand and their IP to a foreign entity and watch all of those potentially disappear in the process. But with our support, they don't have to do that. From the entrepreneur's perspective, there's a certain comfort in knowing that your partner is as committed to Canada as you are. And just knowing that they're here at all is a plus in who they are. Our partnership with Prodigy Game is a great example. It's a fascinating company started by two entrepreneurs out of Waterloo, providing math solutions in a SaaS model. They're going to raise more capital than they needed from a US partner because there was a minimum, resulting in dilution they didn't really want and raising capital way too early in their cycle. But they didn't think there was a comparable Canadian option. Instead, we gave them half that minimum and a partner that was literally a 5-minute walk away. Our fund is no different than any organization. Reputation matters. Knowing who someone is and what they represent is vital when you're making decisions about multi-million-dollar investments. We live here, we're not anonymous, we could be neighbors, we're going to be here for a long time. And if you want to know more about us, within 3 phone calls, you can find out everything you need to know. It's not the same when you're approached by a firm from New York or Silicon Valley when you're based in Canada. And these are all the things that the CBGF is doing to bridge this capital gap with our partners. We invest in dynamic mid-market companies with $5 million of revenue or greater that have a demonstrated growth trajectory. To qualify, they must have a proven business model. We're not investing in startups, but our potential partners could be based anywhere in Canada. We have a truly national mandate. They're looking for between $3 and $20 million of growth capital to fund growth or expansion. And you know what? There are a ton of companies like this. We've met hundreds of them in our first year of business. And we are thrilled with the 6 partnerships that we have made in our first year, with $63 million invested in these great growing Canadian companies. They're in very different industries, including software, automotive, retail, media, fintech. But they all have some things in common. They each have the character, intellect, and drive, and ability to compete on the national, maybe even global stage. They only raised the long-term patient minority capital they needed from a Canadian partner, and they all stayed in control of their companies. And until the CBGF appeared, they did not have an option that was perfect for them. This is just a sample of our first partnerships and indicative of the impact that we can have on the Canadian economy. There are a lot more exciting investments to come. We're receiving inquiries from across the country, demonstrating just how many ambitious entrepreneurs are looking for patient capital to scale up their companies. Finally, they can think bigger. Finally, this gap is fixed. Strategic long-term growth capital is the missing link for the Canadian economy to reverse this hollowing out we're seeing in the mid-market and drive economic activity, productivity, increased employment, exports, and growth. The CBGF fills this gap that until now has gotten in the way of our entrepreneurs' ability to realize their potential. We empower entrepreneurs to think big, knowing that they will have the access to capital, talent, and experience required to take their businesses to the next level, all while staying in control of their companies. But our mandate is more than just about money. The Canadian Business Growth Fund promotes greater confidence and entrepreneurial spirit in Canada, a goal we can all work towards. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have grown up in an entrepreneurial family or have the risk profile or gumption or resources to start up their own company. But the next best thing is to do everything we can to celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit and the great entrepreneurs who demonstrate it daily. We can impart that onto all of our colleagues and employees. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur, but everyone can be an intrapreneur, demonstrating the passion you have for your calling, finding a better way, persevering always, taking measured, calculated risks. This is how all companies innovate, and it's the entrepreneurial spirit. I hope that everyone today understands and embraces the opportunity we have in writing this next great chapter of Canadian business history. All of you touch the growth engine of our economy every day on a regular basis. You talk to entrepreneurs. Sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's weekly, but you're contacting the very lifeblood of our economy all the time. And it might even be when you take your car to the auto repair shop. You don't know where that entrepreneur can take their business. They may be at different stages. They most likely come from different industries. But they all share one common goal, a vision to scale their businesses into becoming anchor Canadian companies. We can help them fulfill their vision. We may be investors, supporters, advisors, colleagues, customers, or friends. We have an opportunity to embolden them, to listen to their successes and challenges, to be their champion, and then encourage entrepreneurial thinking at every level in our own organizations. Entrepreneurship is infectious. Let's encourage our entrepreneurs to push further and higher. Give them the confidence that they can do it, they can create it, and they can build it and grow it into something special. And the most important part of all is they can own it at home, right here in Canada. It's time for all of us to think bigger. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, George, thanks so much for those thoughtful words, and we'll have a proper thank you afterwards. But there's a number of questions that we got from the audience that I hope you'll consider responding to. I think, first of all, there's a number of questions around sort of diagnosing the problems. You've talked about this gap that you and the CBGF team are looking to fill in sort of the mid-market growth capital. Can you talk more about why that exists, especially in the world that we're in today where there's a lot of capital out there of various kinds? Why is there that gap today?
I think fundamentally, it's a great question. I think fundamentally, our funds and our investment vehicles are built with these 3 to 5 year time horizons in mind. And it works well at the later stage of a company's growth for buyout, and it works fairly well for starting a company and getting it off the ground. But the large, great global success stories we know weren't built in that time frame. And so one of the things that we were able to bring to the table is an infinite length. And we're able to invest without forcing a company to sell. So the right path might be a 10-year path, it might be a 5-year path, it might be a 15-year path, but we're not making that determination up front. We're backing that entrepreneur so they can determine that fate. And so the more that we can get our investment vehicles thinking about longer term horizons, I think will contribute to helping fill this gap.
There's I think, really interesting question that we got from the audience about culture. And some people say, look, this isn't so much a capital problem. There's something different about Canadians that make us less risk-loving, more risk-averse. Do you think there's anything to that?
I've heard that before, and my experience from our first year of meeting, we've met over 300 companies, is that that's not true. And we have some of the boldest, most ambitious entrepreneurs in the world. They're looking to grow, and I think that it's easy for us to say we've got a brain drain and we don't have enough executive talent. We need to go elsewhere to bring it to Canada. But we need to create it and grow it and harness it over a period of years. And I think if we can do that, and with the right capital, the right guidance, the right advice, and give the right conditions to success to our entrepreneurs, they will succeed just like any others can in the world. So I don't believe that we're any less ambitious here.
Just switching gears a little bit, who do you think is your competition? When you look out at the landscape and you're talking to entrepreneurs, who do you sort of think that you're competing against?
It's a great question, and For us, we don't look at it as competition. The more the merrier. This capital gap is huge. For the way we look at it, it could be billions of dollars a year as a whole, and we're filling it probably $100 million a year at a time. There's room for everyone, and so I think the BDC does some great work, and I think that there are other private equity firms that have longer-term growth capital mandates. I think that the pension funds do their part, although they can't invest in smaller companies as easily because of scale. So we want to encourage more people to come to the table, and we'll work with any or all of the aforementioned. And I think if more of us do that and take that approach of collaboration, we'll help grow more Canadian companies.
What about either Canadian or U.S.-based growth stage venture? Does that, would that be in your competitive set? Do you ever find yourself? I mean, it sounds like with one of the companies you invested in, they had a term sheet or they had a deal from a U.S. investor, and they ultimately chose CBGF, which is great. Do you often find yourself in those conversations with an entrepreneur who has an offer from someone else?
We often do, and it can go into a number of different directions. And in that one, yes, they had an offer from a U.S. firm, and they were being forced to take more capital than they needed. And so we were able to help them in that we took a lesser amount, and they diluted less, and they were happy with that solution. We had another situation where a U.S. partner came in that had a distinct expertise in the vertical that we were speaking of, and so the entrepreneur wanted to combine us with them. And so we said yes. And so we helped them solve their issue. They wanted a made-in-Canada portion to their solution, but they liked the strategic advice that the U.S. firm was bringing. And so we collaborated with that firm. And so we're really looking at what that entrepreneur's needs are and trying to be flexible enough to meet those requirements.
Can you talk more about what a win looks like for you in an investment? I mean, if you read about venture capital, at least in the U.S., what a lot of venture capital funds are going after is the big win. They want the next Google, they want the next Uber, and they're less interested in sort of a investment that returns 2x their money or 3x their money. They want 100x their money. How do you think about what a win looks like for CBGF?
When we look back at our portfolio in 10 or 15 or 20 years, we want to see that we've taken companies that wouldn't have otherwise become dominant players either nationally or regionally or globally out of Canada and brought them to that level and given them the tools and expertise to get there. And the returns will take care of themselves. We want to generate a fair return for the risk we take on, but we're never going to force a company to exit. We want them to grow over the longer term. And so we're not, someone asked me today at lunch how we look at exits. And we want the entrepreneur to make the decision that's right for them. We're going to encourage them to go longer and build it bigger, but ultimately it's going to be their call if and when that exit happens.
We had a very specific question, I think really about sort of securities law. Why can a 30-year-old buy hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars in lottery tickets, but yet not invest in a diversified portfolio of 100 or 200 high-growth companies? Maybe they're asking if you're going to take external money at some point. I'm not sure.
That's a great question. Well, I'm happy to sit down with that person for a coffee, but it's probably a longer answer than I can sit up here. But we don't take investor money from the retail world. We're an institutional fund. We have 13 bank institutions, but we're encouraging all people that have investment dollars to think about how they can help entrepreneurs. And if they're fortunate enough to be able to back them privately, that's a great thing, because a lot of our great companies start out with angel investors, as you know. And without the angel network that we've got, we would not get the companies to the seed level and have the opportunity to take them to the SME and higher.
That's great. One thing I think that's striking about your portfolio, even a year in, is the diversity, both across geographies and sectors. I mean, does that make life harder for your team? I don't know how big your team is, but is it hard, waking up one day and learning about fintech and the next day learning about auto repair or whatever you're looking at? Do you ever feel that you should specialize, or do you think the generalist approach across the country is the right approach?
It's a great question, and our team is 20 strong, and they're in the audience today, most of them, over here. So we face that challenge. It's a great question, and being based in Canada, and with a goal of having our portfolio represent a microcosm of the Canadian economy over time, we need to be able to be nimble and learn about new industries, and we're not able to specialize. We've got to be able to look at a retail business on one day, a technology business another day, and a fintech business on the third day. And the way we do that is through our talent network, and we bring people to the table with the right expertise for that company. And that only helps us in learning about the company and doing our diligence, but post-close, it helps us bring the right type of advice, the right type of boards, and the right type of strategic guidance to the company. But it is absolutely a challenge of a generalist fund that many share.
Okay, I think we need to wrap up pretty soon. Sort of a two-part question to finish off. First of all, a year ago, is this where you thought you'd be, or is this where you thought CBGF would be now? And then let's take part two, looking forward when you come back to this podium and say 5 years, talk about what you're going to say at that point. So first of all, let's look backwards and let's look forwards.
Yeah, a lot's happened in a year. We started with a borrowed office at CIBC and no brand, no website, no name, no money, we just started literally writing a business plan and started to build a team. And here we are, $545 million close, 6 investments in, about to do a 7th, $63 million invested. It's where we wanted to be. We didn't, you never know that you'll get to the position, but we're trying to build our brand, we're trying to build awareness. We're trying to, our message has resonated with entrepreneurs, which we're thankful for. So it gives us every confidence that over the next 5 years, we'll be able to execute our plan. And that's to become the most active growth capital investor in Canada and to make a real impact in creating some large company success stories that were SMEs when we first invested in them. And so our goal is to invest $100 million a year roughly over time, perpetually. And because we're an evergreen fund where we've got these projected commitments of $1 billion, we believe we can do that in perpetuity and we can make a material impact on the Canadian economy. As you saw, the stats of what SMEs do for us are staggering. And if we can help drive that forward in a small way, we'll make our contribution to the growth in the Canadian economy.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm sure you'll all agree it was really terrific hearing from George and hearing George's insight into the economy and how we grow SMEs. I can tell you, in my day job, I'm an entrepreneur, and finding capital is absolutely a big part of the job. And as much as it's true that there is a real influx happening right now, at least in Toronto, of dollars from the U.S. and from other markets, we're still undercapitalized as an entrepreneurship a class, or entrepreneurs in Canada are broadly undercapitalized. We get about 1/7 the venture capital of entrepreneurs in the U.S. And there's lots of research that shows that where you're located geographically matters a lot for how and what capital finds you. And so I think having more groups following George's vision and following in the footsteps that he and his team are making is just so important. So George, I think what you're doing is really, really important. Big thank you to you and your team for doing it, and a big thank you for being here today and sharing the vision. And I'm sure all of us will be sending more deals your way. So get no rest, cancel the vacations over the summer. So thank you very much. Well, this is the time when usually we tell you about upcoming events, and there are no upcoming events for just now, but we will have a terrific program again in the fall. We really encourage all of you to subscribe to the mailing list if you haven't already. If you enjoyed today's event, this is what we do at the Canadian Club. I'd like to extend another round of thanks to today's event sponsors, Davies and KPMG, and I'd also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event and for all of our events this past season. I should also say it was very generous of you all to recognize my term as president. Our staff team is really terrific, and we're very led by Colleen Kennedy right here. We're very fortunate to have them. So, just before we close, if I could ask that we recognize them for all their hard work over the season. Thank you very much. And to all of you, I hope you have a great and safe summer. We'll see you again in the fall. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.